Hello and welcome back to the Commonplace. My name is Autumn, and I cannot believe I'm about to introduce you to this guest. But joining me today is Mrs. Sally Clarkson. Sally, hello and welcome to the Commonplace.
Hi, I'm so happy to be with you today.
This is a dream for me. I actually shared within Common House, which is where we do book clubs and different things, that I was going to be
Mm.
speaking with you, and the mass excitedness that spread.
Oh,
Everyone just has been so touched by your ministry. I am sure that everyone listening has had a touch point either with your podcast or a book, and it is just
mm.
a delight to speak to you. You've been very influential in my life. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, you're so sweet. You just made my day. So I'm very happy. Thank
Fantastic.
you.
Fantastic. Well, we're here today. If you're watching on YouTube, I have the book with me, but to talk about Sally's forthcoming book. It's coming out at the beginning of October. It's called Well Lived, Shaping a Legacy of Gratitude and Grace. And this is going to be kind of the heartbeat of our conversation. For us, this podcast is running in between two seasons. And so it's kind of just this bonus bridge. Last season, we were talking about how stories shape us, which I know is something you really care about. And we're going
Hmm.
into season 5 to talk about feminine soul craft. So this could not have come at a better time to talk about the
Oh,
life of a
great.
woman, the way the stories that we live, that we tell ourselves shape us. This is just providentially so well timed. So for those who maybe, just maybe, don't know you, Sally, if you could tell us, where are you in the world right now? Because I know you bop around. And what is something that's bringing you a lot of joy by way of introduction?
Oh my goodness. Well, actually, the podcast interviews I've been doing lately have brought me a lot of joy because I've had the opportunity, like with you, to talk to a lot of people that I never knew before. I do love messages and words and thoughts, and so it's really fun to do that. Right at the moment, I am in Colorado, and that's where we have our family home. And then I have 6 conferences coming up, different places I'm speaking, and then I'm going to go back to Oxford again. So I live kind of between the two worlds, and they're very different worlds, and I love them both. So,
That's that's wonderful. 6 coming up. That's a pretty big load. Welcome back to the States for a bit, though. Welcome back to this home. So part of this story in this book is about your time in Oxford and making a new home there and all the things that God taught you. And so just the title itself caught my attention, this phrase, well lived. It reminds me of something we talk about here, which is being whole souled. And I think there's a similar thread in wanting our mind, our loves, our appetites to all come into harmony in service to Christ as a life that's been well lived. And so for you, I would love to know, what does this phrase mean to you, well lived? How has it impacted you most recently in the season in Oxford?
well, I think it was really wonderful. I was there for about 4.5 years, and it was great for me to get away because sometimes just getting away, I think, helps us have perspective, or we look at our lives differently. But I was almost 70 when I was writing this book, and now I'm 71. And there are so many wonderful places to walk in Oxford, and there are lots of pictures of that in the book. But I go on my daily walks, and I had lots of time to really begin thinking through. I feel so blessed to, at 70, have lived a legacy, to be able to see that the Lord worked in beyond my imagination. I'm not a perfect person. We were never perfect, but we were able to know things from Scripture and to know values from the heart of Christ that I feel like sometimes aren't taught in today's world. And of course, you know that I minister to people all over the world, many, many women. And I thought, I want to write a book that says your life matters, your story matters. Every single person in this audience has a different DNA, different fingerprints, different personality, body, aspects. And I think that God wanted us to live a story for his kingdom and for his glory, to bring his light into the world. But we all get to do it in a very unique way that cooperates with our personality and our backstory and the children we have or don't have, the husband we have or don't have, the neighbors we have. And I wanted to write a book that said, look, your story is worth telling, but first you need to live a life that's going to produce a legacy. And I wanted to just help encourage and guide women to really embrace the big part of the story, not just the little details, but the vast part of the story.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think you do that really well. I think a common theme throughout your books, I've read many of them, is this marriage of duty and delight. And as
Hmm.
you're seeing now the legacy you've lived out towards, the 71st year, going back through your books and thinking of all that I've learned, I've been so encouraged that to follow Christ, to obey what the Bible says, to follow these life-giving patterns will bring delight. And I think that
Hmm.
marriage is really evident in this book, that you found such delight while still serving others, still this sense of
Hmm.
duty to laboring beside others and encouraging them in whatever season they're in. And the studio and delight, I think, really comes alive in royal images. It's something that I think a lot of us think of, like the late Queen Elizabeth, someone who held these two in tandem. And royalty actually comes across quite a bit in this book, the way you encourage from scripture, but also this lovely name that you have for your grandmother name, which is Queenie. And it was very
Hmm.
fun to learn how you got that. I'd seen it on Instagram, but it was very fun to see in the book how this kind of came about. And so I would love if you could kind of explain for us this, dignified sense of authority through service, which is kind of what a good benevolent queen would be. How women can be queens in their own spheres and their own seasons.
Mhm. Well, I see it as a picture of Genesis 1, actually.
Mm.
To make a long story short so people can know, my daughter Sarah she had received a full scholarship for her Master's of Divinity in Oxford. But she said, Mom, I can't do it unless you come help me, because she was just getting ready to have her first baby. And there were 2 or 3 hours a week when she had to be in some kind of a discussion or class or whatever. So I moved over and took care of her baby those 2 or 3 hours a week when she had her. Um, and as we were talking, she and my other daughter both agreed that my name should be Queenie. And it's based on I'm not going to go into the whole story, but it's based on a piece of literature where Queenie was the person who sat at the top of the hill and kind of ruled over her little village. She disseminated goodness, and she was wise, and she gave food, and anyway. And they said, that's how you are, Mama. And when we read in Genesis 1, when God created the heavens and the earth, the first thing out of his mouth, because this is the heart of God, it was blessing. He said he blessed them, which is what we should do to our children. And then he said, be fruitful and multiply, which is what we should say to our children. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. And then the whole concept of subdue is kind of a royal sort of image. And what it basically means isn't just to rule over something, make it submit, but the concept there is to cause something to become productive. And so, at the very center of our lives as women, we were made in the image of God with the capacity to think broadly, to be an artist, to be creative, to use our imprint to bring about our light in the world. But also, God gave us this whole purpose of subduing and looking at this beautiful creation He had made and bringing it to a place of flourishing, causing it to be productive. And so, a queen throughout all of history, either good or evil. But the good queen would look at all of the people in her land, all of the things that she was a steward over, all of the different areas in her life that she wanted to rule with wisdom or goodness or virtue, whatever was on her heart. And I think that's such a good picture for us to understand that our children are only going to be with us maybe a fifth of their lives, a fifth or a sixth of their lives. And we have a very short window of time to influence them, but they are a part of who we rule over. Our home is our friends, our skills, our backstory. And so I kind of wanted to put out there a real picture of the fact that we were created to rule over our domain, our dominion, and that we can choose. We have the ability to. We have choice. We have skill set. We have all these things, these resources that God has given us to rule in such a way as to leave a legacy. What do you want to be known for? What can you grow in? How are you growing intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, physically? And so I talked too long right now, but that's kind of the concept of queen. It is a role that we play before God of ruling over the domain that He has entrusted into our hands.
Mm. It's beautiful. We speak a lot about Charlotte Mason over here because we do talk about educational philosophy quite a bit. And maybe it's the British imagination, but that's also a picture she tries to give moms who are at home with their children all day. And I'm thinking now about my audience is a lot of young moms. They have a lot of young kids. Maybe they're just starting the first couple years of school now, with a gaggle of little ones behind them. When you were back in that earlier season and you were trying to think about these are maybe the hallmark focus points for a legacy I'm hoping to lay down, because I know you were very thoughtful and intentional throughout your motherhood. Do you remember how you kind of came to those back then when you took on this role?
Well, as you might imagine, I am an out of the box person. I've never done anything in a traditional way in my life.
Yeah.
I looked at education and I was restless all the way through. I'm probably the first ADD person in my family. And I remember just studying the life of Christ. And really, I think that's what I want to tell people. How much are you investing in your imagination and who God is and what he's like and what he does? And he was the servant leader, and he unconditionally loved his disciples. So I knew right from the beginning that love was going to be the foundation of my influence. I had been in discipleship ministry and missions for a long time, and I thought, I want to so love my children. I want to kiss their heads and sing songs to them and talk to them all the time, because I knew words were important. Jesus was the word. And so I knew intuitively, as well as just I would start gathering information, that to lay a foundation of unconditional love, to converse with my children, to hold them, to train them, and look at the sky that God painted. Isn't it amazingly beautiful? Someday you might paint great pictures. Um, oh, I love the way that God created our little Darcy dog. Darcy is so soft and fluffy. Can you imagine what kind of an animal you might create? So from the beginning, it was words and love. And then, of course, the more I read, the more I realized that that really is what shapes the brain patterns of a baby. So I was learning, I was so excited to do what I did. There weren't very many homeschoolers at the time, but we really wanted to have an imprint on our children's lives from the life of Christ, and education was just a part of it. And of course, we were, anyway, I'll stop there.
No, that's beautiful. That's very helpful. I'm just thinking of the moms, myself included, where sometimes it feels like you are in the middle of a lot of chaos. And so the idea of
Right.
order can almost seem like, how could I possibly with all these little people? And so to be able to hear someone who's done it, I can look back and remember
Hmm.
this was the most important, I think is so encouraging and such a help to us younger moms.
Well,
So
I,
thank you.
I will say, if you know my daughter Sarah, you might know her too. But it was so fun for me when I would be at Sarah's house, and recently I was there in all of March, and it was like deja vu. I thought, oh my goodness, she was she was paying attention because every single day, the habit issue. Every single day, she would sit her four children down, and there is a lot of chaos and order, and chaos and order. It's a constant back and forth. It's the pendulum. Um, but she, from the time they were wee little things, and I even started having tea time with Lillian, her oldest, who's now 6, when she was 2.
Mm-hmm.
Tea time and talking with Queenie, and but as I saw Sarah, while they were eating, she would read 4 or 5 of certain kinds of books, picture books, and history and art and devotions, and they were so used to it. By the time at that point they were 5, 3, 2, and 0.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they just listened and interacted, and so I think that that whole idea, they made the biggest mess I've ever seen any children make during the day, and they cleaned it all up at 5. She has this rhythms where they were just used to it. They had puzzles and coloring books and stickers and reading books and little people, but as with our house, you might have read Educating the Wholehearted Child, but
Did,
we
yes.
had boxes for everything. We had boxes for Legos, we had boxes for dress up clothes, we had boxes, and everything went back to its home, kind of 5 o'clock at night ish. Sometimes for my children, I would, the older children, when they got older, I would put on music with big rhythm that they loved. And I would say, okay, we're going to clean up in 15 minutes. And everybody would go to their place and straighten up. So it is chaotic, and little ones are, so dependent on you when they're little, but you can gently begin putting in rhythms and routines. and they will think it's such an expected thing that they won't know that it's okay to even rebel, because this
Mhm.
little club of children, would just do what they did every day with mom. And
Mhm.
it was real fun to watch.
Yes, one thing that's been nourishing for me as a mom who grew up in a rather unsafe home, so we didn't have a lot of life-giving practices, is to see how naturally my children have taken to these rhythms of beauty. This is what they think life is. It's such a gift to be able to see life through their eyes that this is what they know. But I'm
I
glad you
love
mentioned
that.
Sarah because I wanted to ask you. Obviously, in this book, you shared that, like you shared a little bit earlier, you went over because she was going to be taking these classes and she needed help with her first. But now she has four, and you are still having these lovely adventures to the cafe, walks along the water, time at Queenie's house that sounds so beautiful. But now, as the Queenie and not the mother in this home, as you look out into everything that's happening, has there been anything that you've learned from Sarah that's just been a lovely addition to your vision of motherhood?
Sarah has been born as one of the most civilized women that has ever lived.
I believe it.
Truly, I'm at the point where, because my children are all best friends, and I'm very grateful for how it happened. We aren't perfect. We have our ups and downs, but I learn a lot from them. I say, "Who are you reading? What were you thinking about this? What did you get out of that? What should I read now?" And Sarah, often, we kind of feed each other. If you ever look at Joy's mind and her um, blogs or posts or whatever, you're
Mhm.
likely to see the same books, because we're talking about the same books with one another and the same artists, and we're trying really hard not to copy each other too much because we're in each other's pockets, so to speak. Um, but Sarah is, I don't even know what to say, but she is definitely authentically what she writes about.
Mm,
And she's just got a beautiful soul, a rich mind, and she's really put rhythms and patterns and self-discipline into her life in such a way that she is able to write and also to take care of her kids.
that's
So
wonderful. That's a great example. I remember it was on one of your At Home with Sally podcasts. This was when I maybe only had my first two children. So they were quite young. And I was driving around. We were doing a coffee
mm,
podcast drive, is what I would call them. So I could strap,
yeah, that's a
they were
good idea.
they were like 20 months and a couple months, and I could strap them in and we could just drink coffee quietly while we listened to At Home with Sally. And you said something, and I'm paraphrasing, but it stuck with me all these years, that basically, if you do not care about what your young children are trying to share with you when they're young, they will not share with you when they're older. Like, there's not this time
That's
where all of
right.
a sudden you can start to care and they're going to pour their hearts out to you if this hasn't been the pattern. And what I noticed when reading this book was you had all these moments with each of your children. I can't remember which one of your sons surprised you with tickets to see the Broadway show in New York.
Nathan.
Nathan did. But I just was struck by how well your children know your heart as well. And I know
Mm,
that's only because of the time you took to know theirs when they were younger.
mhm.
And I thought that was such encouragement for the mom with a lot of little kids, or in that season where the things they care about and they interrupt you with are like little flower petals, which are beautiful. And you should stop and notice these things, that you are building into a legacy. That then when they are
Right.
older, like you're saying with your girls, you are talking like great friends. Oh, this is what I'm reading. This is what I'm loving. Look at this beauty. I had to show you. You would appreciate this. And it's because you have this like heart knitness together. And it
Hmm.
just brought that to mind, that phrase that I've thought about so many times. I must care when they share their hearts when they're young if I want to be invited in when they're older, which is an encouragement for
Well,
me.
I love your heart. You are just such a great communicator. Another thing that I really love to tell women is that your teenagers are going to be hormonal, and they're going to push a little bit against you. All teenagers do, in some
Mhm.
small way or large way. And if you want your children to believe in the love of God when they're teenagers in a chaotic world, then you are the pattern for the love of God when they're zero, when
Mhm.
you're rocking them, when they need to nurse again, when they wake you up in the middle of the night, when you're preparing. God has trusted these children into our hands,
Mhm.
and you are preparing them. As a matter of fact, when I first held Sarah, I'd never changed a diaper. I didn't really have any experience, and it was as though when I was holding her, God whispered into my heart. Said this many times, but you are holding eternity in your hands.
Yeah.
How are you going to so love this child that she will believe in my love, and shape this child so that she will be excellent as I have created her with the potential to be? It was
Mm.
just this kind of momentary, oh my goodness, this is really a gift. And I think that what you're doing is helping women understand the gift that they do have. And I love your words. It's really wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Well, a part of this legacy building is that you've done this alongside of your husband, Clay. It seems
Hmm.
like you guys really had a shared vision. You learned how to be good co-laborers, and I think I saw you just recently celebrated 43 years of marriage. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. Yes.
Congratulations. That is
Thank you.
beautiful and wonderful. And you talk about marriage in Well Lived as a sort of dance. And so I was wondering, as you look back, if you could share maybe some of your favorite dance steps or moves that have helped you create a well lived life together. Because I know a lot of the people that I hear from are starting on this home education journey. They're starting with their children. They want to build out a beautiful life, and they're trying to figure out how to do that as a team. And so, any
Hmm.
steps that you could share with us?
I think that Clay and I didn't know a thing when we first started. We certainly never thought that we would home educate our children, had never heard of it, or have 4 children, or move 24 times, 9 times internationally. I mean, we look back now and we think, what were we thinking? But both of us, I think that the strongest part of our marriage, because we are extremely different personalities, look at things from a totally different point of view, but we're both intuitive on a Myers-Briggs sort of a chart. We both don't want to live into what is expected of us, but
Mm,
to think, how can we do this the best way? And so we really came to all of these philosophies slowly over a lifetime together. We would read something and share it with one another, or we would read scripture. And he wrote a book called Heartfelt Discipline, which at the time, I think it's one of the most wonderful books anyone could ever read on discipline, because
yes.
he's a scholar. And at the time, uh, people thought you know, it was sacred
Mm,
to spank your children, or to smack them, as they say in England. And as were reading through scripture, and Clay looked at the original language and at the intent of Proverbs and all the different things, he said, no. He said, children are to be loved and trained. I mean, this is over a long period of time that we discuss this. But I think that what I would say to women is, don't expect your husband to do what God has put on your heart to do.
mm,
Uh, because I think that your husband is a full-fledged adult, and some of them have the heart to do what you feel idealistic about doing, and some of them have never been exposed to it. Never, they don't understand. And so I think discussing things, bringing an article. Eventually the thing that really helped Clay and me is we would go out about every 6 months by ourselves with a date book, and a journal, and we would talk about what are our goals for the family in the next 6 months. What is a character attribute that we want to emphasize? What is working? What isn't working? How are the kids doing? What are their personalities? What are they? So I think that if nothing else, if occasionally you can spoil your husband, maybe you'll do it at home. Make him a cinnamon roll and light the candles and tell him how much you appreciate him. But one of the things that I have realized as a dance step was that you have to be responsive to the moves of your partner.
mm, mhm,
And I really needed to study Clay's personality, because it was very different than mine, and think, what shaped him to become this person? What matters to him? How can I compliment him in this way? Clay is one of my biggest cheerleaders, and he gives me lots of freedom to grow and be professional and do the things I need to do. And I love the passage in scripture that says, honor one another and so fulfill the law of Christ. And so we have sought to try to figure out, okay, what dance step, what is he doing? How can I learn to fit in with what he cares about at this moment? And how can he respond to me with my personality? So um, even as dance partners fall and have bruises and have to learn to fit in together, I was comparing it to an Olympic ice skater in the book. Um, but there are many times of ups and downs, but to learn to respond to the dance of the other person takes a long time and takes a heart to want to be to create a beautiful dance together. It takes time, it takes intentionality, and it takes, I would say, a gracious spirit to affirm and approve of these incredible soulmates that we have. And it takes years to grow into that partnership. It's not automatic. And it takes years to become unselfish. I thought when I was 70 I wouldn't sin anymore. Um, but I think it's going to be 80, um, because I'm still self-absorbed and learning how to be gracious. But our partnership is so valuable for having pursued this for 43 years and
Mm.
grown closer to one another over time. It takes time.
Mm, that's so good. The amount of humility that must be cultivated to study your husband and try to understand rather than just easily write off the things that don't fit maybe your idealistic
Right.
vision in your head. That's just a beautiful practice in honoring someone else and trying to live lowly as you study them and see how God has worked good in them and the things that they are and the way they kind of work as a person. I think that's
Mm.
fantastic. I want to second heartfelt discipline. When asked for books about parenting, I always pair that with the whole brain child. I think heartfelt discipline is fantastic. I actually just recently pulled it out to read it, probably for the third or fourth time, as some of my younger
Oh,
kids are moving into some seasons I've forgotten about what one
yeah.
should do to teach when they're a little four and a little know everything. And so yeah, that book is really really wonderful. So I just wanted to add that in as well. Now, I haven't mentioned yet that the book is full of beautiful photography as well. All these different spots in Oxford. I had a lot of fun showing my kids the book because I've been able to visit Oxford before, and my kids are a little enamored with the idea of Oxford, kind of like you write to us, those of us who dream of the very enchanting world of Oxford because of their love of C.S. Lewis and Tolkien already. And so it was
Mhm.
very fun to show them these beautiful pictures. But what some parts that I noticed in this book is that the life in Oxford, at least the life you carved out and intentionally built for yourself, is very different than some of the harriedness to American life that we moms sort of experience. And your practices always seem really intentional, no matter where you are in the world. But I was wondering if you could share just, I think we have a literary group here. Oxford, of course, is kind of magical. What it was about having a home here, this different culture, different pace of life that really shaped kind of this special season, made it so special.
Well, for one thing, I was living right in the middle of the city, and there we didn't have a car. Most people don't. I hardly know anybody, like two people that had a car that would be imposed on for carrying everything that any of us ever had to carry because we didn't have a car. But I really loved being in an area where we had a walking life, because just being around people. I would go to my favorite coffee place really often. It was just literally around the corner, walking. And I said to my barista, "You make me happy every day,
Yeah.
and you're my favorite person right now." And
Yeah.
so it was easier in that way to befriend people because they were routinely in your life. I would say to my neighbor, "Oh, tell me about your dog. Tell me the story of your dog."
Mhm.
Because every day when I would, walk around the corner to go to the coffee shop or whatever, this dog would bark. And, I felt like it was my personal friend because it recognized me. But I think that the things that I loved over there was number one, I was less known, which was really wonderful.
Mhm.
But just that it's a slower life, and people take time to talk and be friends. And not that we don't here, but we're so busy here, and people measure their lives by activity instead of by heartfelt friendships
Yeah.
and by time spent together. Another thing I did that was probably foreign to a lot of my friends, I taught two different groups. I mentored one group of graduate students, and then the other one was a group of women who were married. And I would bring them into my tiny little house. Sometimes it was in my garage because we weren't allowed during COVID to have people in our house. Um, and we would push everything out of the garage, push it back, all the oil cans or the suitcases or whatever, and we lit candles all over. I had an old tea trolley that I'd bought at an old store, and would light candles and put on a pot of tea and serve something delectable. And that was the way there to open up friendships. I would have dinners for my friends at my house. And again, these are small places. So we had to squish onto, um, you know, we had to squish chairs into the room and sit on the floor. And it wasn't this vast materialistic sort of place, but it was a place where life and beauty and eating as hobbits could
Mhm.
take place. And so I loved the personalness of Oxford and the walks that we went on. They have lots of green spaces. and the people that I got to meet from all over the world.
Hmm. Have you brought any practices from your time in Oxford back to Colorado? Are you trying to bring anything and implement it back home here?
Do you know, I wish I could say yes to that, but I had most of them before I moved there.
I know they're just
And
very Sally Clarkson-esque to have people in your home and tea and take.
well, the thing is, I had, and I don't talk about this as much, but I had lived in Austria
Oh, right.
for 6.5 years. And that's where I really learned to love tea and coffee as a way of friendship.
Mm,
We would meet people in cafes and then eventually we'd invite them to our house. And food was always a great way to share the gospel.
hmm.
And so it just became refined
Yeah,
in England because everybody drink tea there. Not everybody does, but most
yeah.
people did. And so a lot of the things I just got to do more of. Like I love to walk. It settles my neurotic soul. And so there were just more walking places
Mm,
available to me because where I live, there aren't even any sidewalks
right.
and it's all uphill and downhill. Whereas there were a million choices. Which meadow am I going to walk to? Which college am I going to walk through?
Hmm.
Am I going to go to the canal? Am I going to go to the pubs that are way out in the fields of flowers? And so I do miss all of the walking places. And so
Mm,
in that way, I would like to make that habit here, but I don't live in a little town. I
right.
mean, I do live kind of in a little town, but it doesn't have the same. I love downtown living in
Right.
all these beautiful places.
Yes, we live in the city, and it's sort of a stark contrast to kind of the Instagram version of the best homeschool life where your kids can frolic free. But we do have certain humanizing things like we can walk everywhere. And so we patron the same
Right.
places. We know the people who own these businesses, we know about their family. And so there is an element of humanizing living that I will really miss if we move outside of the city. So it
I
really
think
kind of
that's
sounds like,
right.
yeah, it sounds like you kind of found almost more of what you already liked. It was a little more easy to do in Oxford
I
these days.
don't know my neighbors here. I did know my neighbors there,
Right.
so I should probably bring it here. Where do you live?
I'm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Oh, fun. I'm going to be there soon.
Oh, is this part of your tour? Your six stop?
Right.
Okay. Lovely. Wonderful. Okay, so that sounds beautiful. I mean, to me, to my literary heart, walking to a pub in a field of flowers sounds quite dreamy. Walking where Lewis walks sounds quite dreamy. And you have a message. You have a little bit in the book for those of us who are apt to think that this was just the dreamiest life. But you had real life in Oxford. So, yes, it included the highs of getting to live in that dream house that you found and had that secret prayer that you would get to live in. And also, it had a lot of pain, like when you hurt your eye or when COVID
Yeah,
happened, the world locked
exactly.
down and you couldn't see your other children. So it was both really high highs, but also the painful lows that we all experience. And you speak to that in this book. And so I'm thinking for those of us who are listening who are in seasons of either sadness, maybe lock, or well, I can't speak now, in lack or loss, there we go,
Mhm,
or just painful things, how can we learn to note and still tell ourselves a beautiful story about what God is doing in our lives, even if we're in either the mundane or the painful?
mhm. I actually wrote a couple of different books about this, but I wish that I had known when I was a young woman. I didn't. I was so naive about everything. I wish I had known how chaotic the world was going to be,
Mm,
and that it had always been chaotic since Adam and Eve rebelled against God. Because I wasn't prepared for how sad life could be, with relationship difficulties, with my children all were ear infected asthmatics. So eventually we got the hospital equipment in our home because we needed them so often. We were in church splits, car wrecks, fire in our home, two floods in our home. Um, we had, I had three miscarriages. I almost died of one, and just so many difficult things. And what was your original question? Because I have two things in my mind. I want to be sure I'm answering exactly what you want me to. Oh, how to prepare women for that. I
yeah.
think that I there was a point in my life. I wrote this book called Dancing with My Heavenly Father, and I was in Poland, which is where I had also worked as a missionary for 3 years. And it was a time after I had been traveling, and everybody I'd met with was depressed,
Mm,
and I had difficulties, and there was illness, and there were financial difficulties, all these different things. And I thought, this is a pretty hard time in my life too. There's some circumstances that were difficult, and I remembered watching a little child in a park, and it was in spring when all the blossoms were falling down. I don't know what kind of a tree it was. This was gorgeous. And this child was just jumping and playing, and it was as though the Lord said to me, that's how I want you to be, because I want to take your burdens. I want to fill you with joy. I want you to trust me for the hard times, because it is too much to take on the whole world.
Mm.
And I kind of, that was the beginning. I named my first blog. That was a long time ago. I Take Joy. I thought, I'm going to take joy if it kills me. But I realized that uh, I had agency as a woman
Mm.
to light a candle in the darkness,
Mm. Yes.
to love unlovable people, to forgive 70 times 7 instead of being a cynic,
Mm.
and also to know that a night of sleep heals a lot of problems. Uh,
Yes.
there's a lot of adrenaline down at night, and to know that you will live through the sleepless years of your children. But I think that companionship with people who call you to your best self is a necessity, whether it's somebody you read in a book, or whether it's finding somebody that you can befriend, that you can be accountable to, that will always love you back and sympathize with your difficulties and your hurts and your sadness.
Mm.
And I think it's so important that people find a real person. They say community is one of the most foundational principles for people to live well and long and to not get sick.
Wow.
And I've had to fight for community because we've lived in so many places. But I have found that oftentimes there are so many other people who long for community and companionship as well. Might be hard to find, but find a group, like listen to your podcast or find a book from somebody who speaks your language.
Mm.
Do whatever you can to make yourself a person who is a person of joy, who determines to go through life, to fight the battles and bring light to the darkness.
Mm. Yes, that's wonderful. Even the reminder that you might have to be the one who consistently sets up the invitation for people to come over.
I've always had to, always,
Yes,
always,
I've
always.
read that before, that you've like, I've just always had to be the one to make the invitation. And sometimes that
Hmm.
can feel burdensome or just like, why don't I ever just get invited to something? But it's fruitful work and it's important. And so take responsibility, remember you have agency, and invite someone over. So kind of building off of that, I read that part of your intention in writing this book was to encourage those who might struggle with loneliness. And I've noted before that you've shared like you've had seasons of loneliness. And I used to scratch my head and wonder, how could someone as beloved as Sally Clarkson ever be lonely? Like this was just this big mystery to me. But then I found that once I had children and I was trying to build out a slightly different life than your average life, trying to bring in what is true, good, and beautiful in all of our practices and rhythms, that even in a Christian community, it can feel quite isolating to pursue
Hmm.
something like a beautiful legacy. And so loneliness does kind of come with it. But I would love if you, on the way out here, could just leave some encouragement, whether with scripture or story from your own life, for the woman listening today who's also feeling a bit lonely as she tries to pursue this beautiful vision of life.
Well, my husband and I on Myers-Briggs, it's just a personality inventory,
Mhm.
are both one percenters. And as a matter of fact, Karen Andriola was the one who said this to me years ago. We lived not too far from each other for a while. And she said, if you took the one percenters and then if you spread them out all over America, the likelihood of you meeting somebody who's like you is really very rare.
Mm.
We were talking about how what are proper expectations,
Mm.
but I will say that it's if you feel different than a lot of people because you have many ideals, then it's because you are, and good for you.
Mm.
You are acceptable. You are lovely. You are who you are for a good reason. And that's why I say make books your companion, make podcasts or blog posts or whatever, because it's rare for many of us who lead in philosophy to find somebody who exactly understands what our lives are like or what we do. And so you're not alone in that way at all. But I would also say that if you can learn how to listen to the context of the people around you in your life, and to, when you're talking with them, look at the eyes of their heart and say, what is important to them? How can I invest in them? One of my goals through, as I was writing this book, was I want to invest in loving people well the rest of my life. Not that I didn't before, but I wanted to make it a goal that when I meet a new person, when someone comes into my home, as much as I am capable as a fallen human being, I want to love well, because It's the oxygen that each of us needs. And when you love well, you will find kindred spirits,
Mm,
especially if you decide to accept them without judgment and to enjoy the person that they are and seek to build them up. They will respond in like.
that's beautiful. Thank you, Sally. Thank you so much for being here today. Where all can we find you and all of your many good works?
SallyClarkson.com is where my blog is, and you can find my books and a lot of things about me. But my favorite thing that I do is what we're doing right now is my podcast, which is At Home with Sally and Friends, because I just love sitting. I can be in my pajamas and nobody knows and
Yeah.
have a really wonderful conversation with the world. I
Yes.
love sharing ideas. So At Home with Sally, and then I have a membership where we have lots of resources and people and books and ideas, and it's called Everything is Sally. I didn't do that. My branding team did. But it's Life with Sally. So At Home with Sally and Life with Sally are places I hope that you can find encouragement.
Excellent. And I will link all those in the episode notes today to make that easy for people to follow up with you. Sally, thank you so much. Congratulations on another beautiful, encouraging book. Many
Mm.
best wishes as you begin your travel through the States and back over
Oh,
to
thank you.
England. And thank you for being with us today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. You are just so much fun to be with. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Sally. Everyone else, I'll see you next season.